Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1028A, and today's date is July 21st, 2016, and the title of the episode is, The Economy is Doomed. Helicopter money will not work because it was tested in 2008. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, as we can see, Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, we see that the economies of the private central bank countries, they're slipping. Now, of course, they're trying to blame everything on the Brexit, as we know. And this is not going to hold water. Because as we can see, in the UK, retail sales, they have fallen. And we've seen retail sales have fallen 6 months up until June. So there's no way that this has to do with the Brexit. And we see that the retail sales volumes in the 5 weeks to July 2nd also dropped by 0.9%. This is the largest fall this year. Clothing stores have reported that the sharpest annual drop in quarterly sales in 25 years. Now, of course, they're blaming some of this on the weather. They're blaming some of this on the Brexit. They're blaming everything except what the economy is truly doing. And the economy is falling apart. We see in Turkey, their credit rating is going to be dropped from a BB plus to a BB because of the coup. There is a negative outlook right now from S&P, which we kind of expected that this was going to happen. We also see HSBC. They're looking for a new round of cuts. And right now, they have laid off 87,000 jobs, and we're still counting because there are more layoffs on the way. Now, to pump the student loan bubble up even further, we see that Amazon is getting into the student loan market. And we can see right now that student loans, they have topped about 1.3 trillion. And we see that Amazon, well, they're getting into the market to blow this bubble up even further. Now, they partnered with Wells Fargo, and what they're going to do is they're going to offer an interest rate discount to select Amazon shoppers, and I believe these are going to be the prime shoppers. So they're going to try to pump this bubble up as big as it possibly can get, because as we know, the U.S. government central bankers at this point cannot come to the rescue when things start to fall apart. So they need to continually pump it up. Because as we know, the everyday person who is graduating cannot find the work to pay for these loans. The individuals are strapped with a huge amount of debt. This is why they've created this program to allow students to make payments based on their income. So if you're making $20,000 a year or $25,000 a year or $18,000 a year at a part-time job, they will adjust your payments to reflect that. And if you don't have a job, in many cases, they won't even have a payment for you because there's nothing else for them to do except make it easier for the people who can't find work and pump up the bubble. Those are their two choices. Now we're seeing another indicator letting us know that this economy is not doing well, and it comes from the art district. Now, art sales, they are tumbling. Christie's is reporting a 38% plunge in the first half of this year. We're also seeing other art dealers, like Sotheby's, they're also seeing art sales are down. So what we're seeing right now is this phenomenon where the housing in the Hamptons, those sales are falling. The luxury apartments in New York, those sales are falling. San Francisco, those sales are falling. Art sales, they are falling. In the retail sector, we see sales for goods, they are falling. It's contracting. We see auto sales, which is a little different because the manufacturers can continually produce cars And when they're stuffed into the lots of the dealership, those are counted as sales. But when we look at how many people are actually purchasing cars, we see this is also declining. Now, the government came out with their statistics today saying that existing home prices, they have hit record highs. But we see that sales growth is slowing. Now, remember, these are government numbers, because when I look around the U.S., and they're taking it from certain cities, but when we look outside of those cities, we see the opposite happening. And there are many reports showing that this is exactly what's going on right now. But of course, the U.S. government central bankers, they need to make it look like everything is going very well in the housing market. But we can see things are rapidly falling apart, because if everything was going well in the housing market, they wouldn't need 3% down, 0% down, 0% interest rates. They wouldn't need all of this to pump the market up. They wouldn't tell the banks to keep the foreclosures off the market, to pump the prices up. They wouldn't have hedge funds, investment companies, receiving free money and purchasing up thousands of houses, and they're being told, don't let them on the market, rent them if you can, if not, just hold on to them. And the reason why this is all happening is because the entire system is breaking down, and it's declining right now. We see the Philly Fed, well, it missed expectations, tumbling to 6-month lows, and it hit about negative 2.9%. They were expecting a positive 4.5%, but that didn't hit it. And we're starting to see that things have bounced up, and guess what? They've dropped back down. And we're starting to see that the Philly Fed, the Chicago Fed, the Empire Manufacturing, all of this, we're seeing a little bit of a surge, and then we're seeing the downward trend continue. The debt that is presented to the people from the government, the $19.4 trillion, has hit all-time highs. Actually, since Obama has taken office, he has added $1.1 trillion a year to the national debt. And as the debt continually climbs and the revenue continually falls, they're going to have a problem meeting payments. It doesn't matter what the interest rates are at this point. They won't be able to hit the principal payments. And that is going to be a big, big problem. Now, we've been tracking the Baltic Dry Index, and since the Brexit, the Baltic Dry Index continually moved up, and it hit a high of about 736 or 737 or so. And since that point in time, we're starting to see the Baltic Dry Index start to fall again. It's fallen another 10 points. We're down to 726 at this time. And as we know, the U.S. government central bankers, they're going to continually manipulate the statistical information to convince us that everything is fine. And we're starting to hear from different areas, financial pundits, talking heads, that there are problems ahead. S&P right now says there might be a crisis of confidence around the globe because corporate debt is continually rising. They're going to say it's going to hit $75 trillion by 2020. We see corporate defaults on the rise. And when we look at this, we need to say to ourselves, what's going on here? Because when we look at the entire situation, we're seeing certain areas where it is completely worse than 2008. We see certain areas that is approaching what 2008 was like. And the U.S. government central bankers are telling us that everything is absolutely fine. And then we hear from S&P, we hear from Moody's, we hear from other financial pundits that, yes, there might be problems ahead, but we're not too sure. And what we're seeing is they're preparing for what is coming. They're letting everyone know that there are problems down the line, no matter what the government says. Because how long can you keep this illusion alive? Because people are starting to realize there is something wrong here. It makes no sense for the stock market to be this high with corporate earnings down, with corporate defaults rising, with credit where there's a major problem there. And what we're seeing right now, S&P, they're highlighting that the monetary policy that was easing thus far is contributing to the increased financial risk, with the growth of corporate borrowing far outpacing that of the global economy. S&P strongly suggests that a correction in the global credit markets is unavoidable. In fact, they're saying they believe the credit correction began in late 2015, and it's going to accelerate throughout this year and get much worse. And S&P right now are saying that the global central banks are now trapped. They no longer wish to push rates lower on one hand, but on the other hand, any sharp spike in rates would wreak havoc on the global credit markets. So right now we can see that the central bankers, they're looking for different ways to keep the system alive before they collapse it. That's exactly what they're doing right now, because they know they can't keep this going forever. It's completely impossible. People think they can. People think, well, they just can keep creating money out of thin air. They can keep increasing the debt of all these countries. Eventually what happens is the countries don't have the revenue to pay for the debt, no matter what the interest rates are. And we're reaching that point where it's getting harder and harder. Because think about it, if we're at 0% interest rates right now, and some countries are at negative, we know at this point, as more and more people lose their jobs, and as the debt continually rises, like we said, 1.1 trillion just in the US every year, it's getting harder and harder to meet their obligations. Now, they're talking about helicopter money, and we've talked about this before. And what we're seeing right now is that they have already tried helicopter money. They tried it back in 2008. Think about what happened in 2008. The Bush administration, supported enthusiastically by Congress, the Federal Reserve engaged in a tax rebate scheme during the first half of 2008. The government essentially paid people for being people, and they distributed this money through tax credits. So when we look at this back in 2008, we see what happened. In the spring of 2008, they did the following. Those single filers, well, guess what? They found $600. $1,200 was received for married couples and $300 for any children, and they received it in their bank accounts. So back then, they actually gave money to the people. They thought people were going to go back out and spend that money like crazy. Guess what? It didn't happen. Now, they did this because they were hoping to continue the economy moving along. But it didn't work. Because the theory sounds great in a vacuum, in a closed classroom, but when you put it out in the real world, where people aren't making money, they don't have money, and this is all they have, they're not running out to spend it. Now, think about when they did this back in 2008. The economy was already crashing. Housing was already crashing. Even though they were telling us everything was fine, that they weren't forecasting any type of recession during the year we had the recession, they really thought people, if they had $600 or $1,200, they were going to run out and buy a new TV. They're going to go out and buy goods. But it didn't happen. The same thing is going to happen right now. People are getting by day to day. They know what their finances are. They know what they can afford. And if they do receive $500, $1,000, they're going to keep it. They're going to use it for what they need. They're not going to go out and purchase like the central bankers think they should. And this whole thing is going to fail once again. So when we look at this, we see that the economy is completely doomed. The central bankers, all they have left is creating currency out of thin air. They can manipulate the statistics, they can manipulate everything, but they can manipulate it so far because when everyone is out of work, when the economies are reeling, when the countries are so far into debt that they can't make the payments and they have to continually take out more loans or create more currency depending on what country you're in, you can see right there and then the system has come to an end. And more people will be waking up. More and more people will realize that the statistical information is completely wrong. And this is when the confidence for the central bankers starts to fade away. And this is what they're trying to avoid. What they're trying to do right now is quickly create something where they can blame it on another group or country. So they are not blamed. Remember, their entire agenda is to restart this system, to reduce the population, to enslave people once again. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.